Today on Larry King Now, Grammy-winning guitarist Joe Perry of Aerosmith on his new memoir.
I wouldn't have written the book 20 years ago because of some of the things that I put in there, because I wouldn't have wanted my kids to read it.
On the truth behind his rocky relationship with Steven Tyler.
We still have our rough spots, but I accept the way he is, just the way he accepts the way I am.
Plus, when Aerosmith was so huge, what was that like?
I think that it was like pretty scary.
It's all next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. As a member of one of the most successful rock bands in history, Aerosmith's Joe Perry is widely considered one of the greatest guitarists of all time. He's a husband, a father, a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and his new memoir, Rocks, My Life In and Out of Aerosmith, is now a New York Times bestseller. It chronicles over 40 years of sex, drugs, and one, of course, a history of rock and roll as well. Joe, thanks for coming. Why'd you decide to write this?
Well, I felt like the band's 40th anniversary was rolling in, and we were working on our last record for Sony, so it kind of felt like an appropriate time to kind of look back and kind of get it down on paper. And it felt like it was kind of the end of an era in a way with the band, also in the music industry, and also the start of a new era. So I felt like it was the right time to do it.
Frank Sinatra told me once, there's a lot to be said for longevity. How do you account for Aerosmith's longevity?
Well, without a doubt, I have to say it's that feeling that we get when all five of us get together on stage and play. And I have to admit, it's a very selfish thing, because we love playing. I mean, whether we're playing in front of 200 people or 1,000 people or whatever, it's exciting, and the adrenaline flows, and all of a sudden we feel like we're 18. I know that sounds like a cliche, you know, rock and roll keeps you young and all that, but I'm here to say I feel that way when I get on stage with those guys.
You always like getting on stage?
Yeah, that's the cloth we're cut from. We came up in that era when the only way to really get your music out there was to either you played live, and if you were lucky enough to get a song on the radio, I mean, we came up when, you know, AM was the only radio, and then it kind of was switching over to FM, and the DJs could play what they wanted. But basically, you got out there on the stage, and you had to make an impression on the audience.
Tell me about the formation. How was Aerosmith formed?
Well, personally, again, the book is really about how I ended up in that place. I grew up in a small town, small suburban town.
Where?
In Hopedale, Massachusetts, about 40 minutes outside of Boston, kind of near where the Patriots play, out there in the
Foxborough.
In the suburbs. And so there wasn't much music around. I didn't even know a guitar player at the time. I picked up a guitar, and I fell in love with what I was hearing on the radio, and I got a student guitar. I finally convinced my parents to get me a guitar, and I have a learning disability. It was really, really hard for me in school. I ended up dropping out of prep school, knowing that I was going to have a really hard time getting through college. And
what was the disability?
I had a learning disability, that ADHD, I think they call it, and
attention deficit.
Now they have a name for it. You know, back then it was looked at as a discipline problem. They thought you weren't concentrating enough. I mean, I wanted to please my parents. I wanted to get the good grades, and I wanted to do what they wanted. But I also didn't see myself following that path. I just felt like I was never going to live in Hopedale. I was going to get out and see the world, and I wanted to be a marine biologist. And to get there, I had to have some kind of college, and it just didn't look like it was going to happen. And at the same time, I heard rock and roll was something I just got inside, and it wasn't anything I could escape.
Did you have a natural affinity for the guitar?
Yeah, I've definitely had a feel for it. I love just the way the visceral feeling of it, the physical feeling of the guitar vibrating, and the way it felt in my hands, and so it came to me naturally, and I just taught myself how to play.
So no regrets over not being a marine biologist?
Well, you know, I look back at it and I go, I think I would have had a good time doing that, but actually I'm able to kind of get into that side of it now because I support the Sea Shepherds, and whenever I get a chance to in fact, I brought to the band the fact that they could set up an information booth at our shows. So whenever they can do that, we do that. I went to visit them down in Melbourne at where they have their fleet, and met the crews, and we do what we can to help them.
When we return, Joe on the truth behind his relationship with Aerosmith frontman Steven Tyler. He'll tell us about revisiting darker times for a new memoir, and why actor Johnny Depp, a good friend of ours too, wrote the foreword. Stay with us. The book is Rocks. Right back with Joe Perry. The book is Rocks, My Life in and Out of Aerosmith. The guest is the great guitarist Joe Perry. Aerosmith has been around for 45 years. You never broke up, right? Or did you?
Well, I left the band in 1979, actually at a show in, I think it was in Cleveland. We were playing to 60,000 people in a stadium, and but there was so much going on in the band. I mean, we're still pretty young, and we just didn't know how to handle the personal side, dealing with the professional side, and trying to separate the two.
How long did you leave?
And I left for almost 5 years. And
so what did you do?
I did 3 solo albums. I worked with a bunch of different guys, and basically under the name Joe Perry Project, and played clubs all over the country, and in Canada, and any place I could. And that's what I wanted to do. I said, I don't want any more of the pressure of these huge gigs, and I just want to get in a van, and I want to just go from club to club and play.
But you came back.
Yeah, it got to the point where I kind of got that out of my system, but also personally, I went through a divorce. I kind of got out of a marriage that it just wasn't the right setup, and the wrong woman. Fortunately, I got an amazing son from that marriage. But other than that, it was part of why I had to get away from the band for a while.
Johnny Depp wrote the foreword.
Yeah. He
was a guitar player, right?
Oh, he is. He's an amazing guitar player, and I can't say enough about his love for the blues, and for the history of the music, and frankly, he's got one of the best guitar collections I've ever seen. And that was after we met and did our I'm a fan, you're a fan, and that kind of thing. All we talk about is music and family, really, and I've known him for about 4 years now, and he's just been. We both are kind of the same. I mean, we like our privacy. We're kind of loners. We love the idea of having a family, and it's so we have a lot of things we're in common.
Was it tough to revisit dark times?
Yeah. I had thought that that it was going to be one of those things that, I'd been, you put some of those things in, back there somewhere, and you figure it's not going to affect you anymore if you have to talk about it. But that was one of the things when I talked with my wife, Billy, that actually I met her before I went back with Aerosmith, and she was probably one of the reasons why I went back. And we talked about it. I wouldn't have written the book 20 years ago because of some of the things that I put in there, because I wouldn't have wanted my kids to read it. But now they're grown up. My youngest he just graduated from BU this year, so, and they know Dad in the stories, and they're old enough now, so I feel okay about putting everything in there that I had to put in there.
It was kind of cathartic too?
Yeah, yes, but it definitely was not fun.
In your book, you write of your relationship with Steven Tyler, and you say, friction between Steven and me never stopped. After every show, the dressing room became a battleground. Listening to those arguments, outsiders might have thought we were on the verge of murdering each other.
Yeah.
What was the problem?
Well, I think that we had a lot of trouble separating our musical differences from our personal lives. And I mean, we started off as kids, basically, in that apartment, and with no other responsibilities other than to ourselves and furthering the dream of doing what we wanted to do. But I mean, we grew up together, kind of, and grew into middle-aged men, and with families, and wanting to live our lives in different ways. And that was when we got back together. We had kind of sorted some of that stuff out. So
what's it like now?
We still have our rough spots, but I accept the way he is, just the way he accepts the way I am. I have to take as much responsibility for the bumps and the avalanches in the road as he does.
Does it affect your performance?
Actually, that's probably the one place where we are on the same plane. I mean, when about 5 minutes before the show, we're standing there together, and the adrenaline starts to flow, and we hear the audience starting to get excited, and like I said, that we're 18 again, and that's when all of a sudden we're like the brothers that we were when we first met, and the five of us just get together and do what we do, and we love it. We love the reaction from the crowd. It gives us more energy to play, and that's what really brings us together.
Has he read the book, Steven?
I'm not sure. I know he read the first 4 chapters, and he texted me and said, you know, I'm really liking the book. I like the way you did a good job on the way it feels, good pictures and all that. And I haven't heard from him. What
did you think of him doing American Idol?
Well, at the very first, it kind of went like, well, it's a little middle of the road for a band like ours. I mean, we always considered ourselves rebels and pretty arrogant, and you had to be back in the 70s to really make an impression and have that drive. And so it kind of, at the very first, it felt a little bit like, you know, it's a little bit, I mean, I don't know if he would have done that in the 70s, but the bottom line is I was really happy for him because I knew it was the kind of thing he would love and excel at because he's really witty, he's fast on his feet. But the way we found out about it was what really bothered me. We read about it online, and he didn't come to us and say, hey guys, I'm going to be doing this. You know, I've heard that I might be doing this. Let's plan around it. I heard about it on the internet. So finally, at a show, before a show, I think it was in Vegas, I grabbed him by the elbow. You know, I asked everybody else in the room to leave, and I said, Steven, what's going on? You know, I mean, well, and then he said, well, I was afraid you guys were going to try and talk me out of it. And I said, don't give us that much power. I mean, we're actually happy for you. You know, you got to talk to us about this stuff because, I mean, how else can we plan our career? I mean, the 4 of us are. What are we going to do over this all this time when you're going to be doing this? You know, but we are happy for you.
Up next, Joe will give us his take on the state of the music industry, and he'll respond to people who say that rock and roll is dead. The book is Rocks. We'll be right back. Gene Simmons, another friend of ours, said this about Joe Perry and Rocks. Joe Perry has been the Axmeister longer than some of you have been alive. He's been there and done that. He's been the consummate 6-string gunslinger for a band that has always done things their own way. Joe never went Hollywood, never looked over his shoulder to see who was running behind him. Ever the gentleman rocker, Joe sits high atop of rock royalty. Admit it, you're jealous. When I grow up, I want to be Joe Perry. That's Gene Simmons, who also said that rock and roll is dead.
Right.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's, in some ways, I mean, it's kind of a general statement. In some ways, I think that we are seeing the end of an era. The whole MTV era, and when the record companies had so much power, and I mean, it wasn't unusual for somebody to put out a single and sell a couple of million records and sell out arenas, and that type of rock and roll was king. And I think that we're because of the way the business has changed, the way that technically the way people get their music, I think that that's changed a lot of things. Mostly the way that people receive their music, but I don't think that the excitement of music and the excitement that the fans feel in a live performance, I don't think that's gone away.
But the live performances, the record business is a little different, right? The charts, the rock and roll bands aren't on the top of the charts now.
No. Our kind of rock and roll, you know what? I could never figure it out. I mean, there are guys that you know make a career out of trying to figure out what's going to come next. Just when you think, okay, well, everything's going the way that, like, the divas, or the boy bands, or the hip hop, or whatever, then somebody all of a sudden puts out a rock and roll hit, and it's like all of a sudden rock and roll's back.
Nothing's dead then.
No, there's always a chance for that to happen.
Does Aerosmith still sell out?
Most of the time, we do really well. We have a great following, and fortunately, our fans from the 70s
have grown up with
shows, and I see a lot of families coming, and I ask them. Sometimes they're, both the father and son will be fans. And I remember when that first started happening, they would go, and the parents would go sit on one side of the arena, and the kids would sit on the other side with their friends.
Some new artists out there. Any new artists you like?
There are a few. I do hear a lot of stuff out there. Some of it on TV. Some bands are. Some of the best rock and roll I've heard is actually on TV. In fact, one of my sons has three songs on an independent film that's at Cannes this year.
Really?
And so the outlet and where people get their music has changed a lot. And I do hear some music that I can't say who they are, but there's still some good music out there.
When Aerosmith was so huge, what was that like?
I think that it was like pretty scary. I mean,
blow your mind?
It really, we had no idea it was going to go that way, especially in the 70s. I mean, it was a cottage industry almost. I mean, from Elvis and then the Beatles, and they were just learning how to make it work. I mean, you hear some stories about how the promoters would take advantage of the artists, and I mean that story goes back to the 20s and the 30s, ever since they invented the first recording, and it's basically, I think that's true of any art, whether you're a painter, a writer, any artist that gets to the point where they can make a living selling their art, that they have to deal with guys who are trained to make money from a commodity, whether they're lawyers or agents or whatever. And artists just don't think like that. And some of us are better at it than others, but I think that something about the way our brains are wired. We're just not businessmen.
How'd you handle all the money? You made a lot of money.
Well, at the first time around, I think we assumed that it was being handled the right way, and
people took from you,
and we came to the point where we realized that it wasn't being handled the right way. And I don't think that anybody did anything illegal, but I think it was an example of
for investments.
Well, I think that the way that the contracts are written and the amount of money that they would take, whatever. Was it legal? Probably. Is it immoral? Yes. I think we could have been better taken care of.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I think that that my wife and I she's really the one that can really, she handles everything on that end of the business. I just go out there and play rock and roll, and she takes care of the business, and frankly, that's what makes us such a good team.
Is it still the same kick?
Yeah, I'll
It is.
tell you, the last 5 or 10 gigs we did were probably some of the best shows we played in 20 years.
Really? The talent doesn't lessen?
I think you just
You can still do the same thing?
I think you get better at it. It's like anything else. It's like you were saying, you ask questions at home. I mean, it's like I love to play guitar. I mean, if I'm not in the studio at some point, and I mean, obviously when I'm on the road, it's a whole different paradigm. But when I'm home, if I don't get in the studio, I start to feel like restless.
You've been 20 years with Sony, huh?
Oh God! I mean, well, they were the first one. Columbia signed us. Clive Davis, the famous Clive Davis, and
Clive's a great friend.
And for the 70s, we were with them. Then we went over to Geffen for a while, and then Sony, Columbia took us back, and we fulfilled our last deal with them. And right now, we're just really taking a break. We've been going at it hard the last 4 years, and we're just really taking a break, and probably in the next few months we'll get together and figure out what we're going to do next.
When we return, Joe will tell us more about Aerosmith's new album, and we'll play a little game of If You Only Knew. The book is Rocks. Don't go away. We're back with the great Joe Perry. Rocks, My Life In and Out of Aerosmith is now out, and Joe Perry is considered one of the great guitarists of all time. What's the new album like?
Well, the last record we did wasn't a great seller. I get some compliments on a few songs here and there, but we went about it with Jack Douglas in a way, the producer that we worked with all through the 70s, and I think we made some good music on the record. I mean, there are certainly some songs on there that don't stand up, but I had a feeling like I don't know the next time we're going to go in the studio, so just throw it all out there. But in the meantime, we're not really sure when we'll record again.
When you're on stage, when you play songs from the 70s,
yeah,
some artists don't like to go back. They'll say, gee, Frank told me once that he wished he didn't have to sing My Way again.
Right.
Do you get that way about?
Well, when I play the first line of, say, Walk This Way or Dream On, and I hear the reaction from the audience, all of a sudden I know that I have to put everything I have into that song, because that's the one time those people are going to hear it. Maybe they've seen the band a bunch of times, maybe it's the first time. And I want to leave them with the best impression that I can.
So
I leave it all out there on the stage.
Well, we're going to play a little game of If You Only Knew. I just threw some questions at you.
Okay.
Remember the first girl you kissed?
Oh, vaguely, yeah. I do.
That was in, how old were you?
Oh, man, probably 12 or 13.
Favorite Aerosmith song?
Let the music do the talking.
What do you listen to in the car?
Oh, the engine.
Favorite city to perform in?
That's a toss-up between Boston and Detroit.
What was a bigger deal to you, winning the Grammys or being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I think being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Bring Jimi Hendrix back to life.
Craziest groupie moment? Must have been many.
Well, there's one in the book. It was a wild and crazy time, to use a Steve Martin line, and we were backstage after the show, and the groupies there were famous for being ready for the bands, and I was never a groupie guy. I never got into that. I was always looking for the right girl, and I found her. Her name's Billy. We've been together 30 years. But anyway, as I'm watching this scene go on backstage in Atlanta, and the guitar player that was in the band for the first year was actually washing off his Mr. Important with a bottle of Jack Daniels, because he was the only one who was married, and he was fooling around, and he said, "I can't go home with anything," and that was the only thing he could get that was as close to a disinfectant. And he was standing over a big plastic bin of trash, and he was cleaning himself off. Anyway, I thought that was a funny scene.
If you could play music with one deceased person, who would it be?
Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
A type of music you don't like?
I don't think there is one. I get inspired by all different kinds of music.
What worries you the most?
Right now, Ebola.
What's the hardest thing you've had to overcome?
Getting out of my own way.
Who's your favorite guitarist?
Right now, living, Jeff Beck, and all-time Jimi Hendrix.
If you didn't do music, what would you do? You'd be a biologist, right?
I would have something to do with the ocean, yeah.
A fan sent in this at ScottyBoy4 from Twitter. What can you tell us about your recent recording session with Paul McCartney?
It was fascinating to watch how he worked, and that it was taken for granted that we would just play live in the studio, all of us as a group, as opposed to layering or one guy playing and then another guy playing. And the way he went about it he was very friendly about the whole thing. I mean, but very focused and very. I mean, I hate to say old school, but the kind of recording I believe is the best recording, which is like get it live in the studio. And I asked him about the left-handed, right-handed guitar playing thing, and he said, you know, that's a good question, and because he plays left-handed, and I'm left-handed and I play right-handed, and I didn't have any examples to go, well, that guy plays left-handed, so that's how you can do it. I just took the instruction from the little 45 that came with the student guitar, and it said put the neck here and put the pick here, the plectrum here, and go from there. And I didn't know any guitar players, period, back then, as an example. And he said that there are a number of stars and pop stars that were he was aware of that played left-handed, so he knew that was an option.
How good a guitar player is he?
He's probably pretty good, but what's more important is he can write songs on it, and that's really what is the skill to me. I mean, you don't have to be a good guitar player to write great songs.
You're a great guest.
Oh, thank you. You're a great interviewer. And
Joe Perry, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thanks a lot.
I want to thank my guest, Joe Perry of Aerosmith. Make sure to look for their new album and go pick up his new memoir, Rocks, My Life in and Out of Aerosmith. And you remember you can find me on Twitter at King's Things. See you next time.